Ahoy Captains, it's Vaz again with another video from World of Warships Legends. And welcome to Versus. In Versus we compare two similar and readily available ships to determine if one is better than the other. Free to earn ships is what I'll start calling them. We'll tally up the points as we go, and at the end we'll hope to determine a winner. We'll also throw in a little bit of information and some tips on the builds and playstyles of these ships. Today we have two Italian Tier 7 battleships going head to head, the Tech Tree Vittorio Veneto and the Premium Roma. If you haven't unlocked either of these ships yet, which one do you go after first? If you already own one, should you go for the other? And if you own both, which one should you use over the other? Well, we're about to find out in Versus. But first let's go over a little bit of the info on these ships. In the game, the Veneto can be had for 18 million credits once unlocked through the Tech Tree, while the Roma can be purchased anytime for the low price of 750,000 global XP. In real life, these two ships are sister ships belonging to the Littorio class of Italian battleships. Because the Littorio and the Veneto were laid down on the exact same day in 1934, some people actually named the class after the Veneto. However you decide to call the class, the Veneto was commissioned in 1940, while the Roma was commissioned in 1942. Next, let's talk about the playstyles of these ships. We'll get into specifics a little later on, but personally I like to take advantage of the Veneto's deadly sap secondaries by brawling up close. And because I use D-Reveal as an inspiration on nearly all of my battleships for other nations, he's leveled up pretty high, so I might as well take advantage of that. For the Roma, I can still smell the fabric softener from the gloves of the recently released Angelo Iacchino. He effectively turns the Roma into a mid to long range sniper that can still be pretty tanky in in-game scenarios. My skill choices for all white gloves are Flammable Cannoneer, Gyrating Drill Bits, Marksmanship, Iron Resolved, and for the legendary skill, Testudo. When it comes to Paulo and the Veneto, the skills I choose are Not One for the Nuisance, Porcupine, Firefighter, Properly Meticulous, and for the legendary skill, Running with Scissors. Let's go over some inspirations now, there's no shortage of options anymore. Continuing on with Paulo, I like to use Cunningham for accuracy and Von Hipper for secondary range. You could also use Iacchino, Madden, Jajard, or Giuseppe if you wanted. Back over on Iacchino, I'm using D-Reveal for reload help and Jellicoe to go all in on the 4th row skill and legendary skill. I feel like Takagi would work well there too, but other options are Cunningham, Madden, and Jujard. Let's next run through all the upgrade slots. Both ships have 4 starting upgrade slots, while the Veneto has 3 unlockable slots. Starting with slot 1, the options are Aiming Systems Mod 1, Secondary Battery Mod 2, AA Guns Mod 2, and Main Battery Mod 2. For the Roma, we've chosen Aiming Systems Mod 1, and for the Veneto, we've chosen Secondary Battery Mod 2 to build into those secondaries. In the second slot, the options are Steering Gears Mod 2, Propulsion Mod 2, and Damage Control System Mod 2. And with both ships, we've chosen Propulsion Mod 2. I feel like that'll help us when it comes to approaching enemies while concealed in our smoke screens. Next up is slot 3. The options are Concealment System Mod 1 and Target Acquisition System Mod 1. Both ships were using the Target Acquisition mod, and I think that's because the Concealment mod system hadn't come out yet. But I think for both ships I'd still stick with the Target Acquisition, because when you do get close up to somebody in your smoke screen, you hopefully want to at least see them before they see you, or at least at the same time. And lastly, in slot 4, the options are Secondary Battery Mod 3, AA Guns Mod 3, and Main Battery Mod 3. And for both ships, we're using Main Battery Mod 3 because we want to reduce our reload time. We're not using the Secondary Reload mod on Veneto because its secondaries reload pretty quick already. Alright, next up we have the loadout screen. Now let's talk about what makes these battleships very different from any others. These guys both have the exhaust smoke generator consumable, which makes sneaking up on opponents quite fun. I'm sure everyone knows how crawling smoke works, but in case you don't, the trick is to not go full speed to take advantage of the smoke for as long as possible. I'm not exactly sure what kind of speed is best, I'm not really that kind of player, I just go out and shoot the red guys, but it's probably half speed or so. But of course, if you're YOLOing, or trying to do a drive-by, then heck, you're gonna want to go all out. Moving over to the heals, they're pretty much the same here, and well, everything else including the smokes are the same, so we're gonna move on. Next, let's move over to the stats screen. It's everyone's favorite after all. Here the Roma has 600 more hit points, and coupled with its ability to heal an extra 300 something more hit points, means it has a larger hit point pool, but by less than 1,000. I don't see how that's a big enough difference to call it an advantage, so we're gonna settle for a tie there. We'll save the armor for the armor viewer, and the torque belts are both identical, which are really good for the tier actually. Alright, it's time for the most interesting screen, the artillery screen. Some mods like the 4th slot, which is the reload mod, and the Veneto secondary mod from the 1st slot, had messed up a few base stats, so excuse the crude editing to show the real values. You gotta give me a little bit of credit, it's super hard to write with a half-broken laptop touchpad. What my chicken scratch is trying to point out is that the big main difference on this screen is that the Roma has a 30-second reload, while the Veneto has a 31-second reload for the main battery. 1 second isn't that big of a difference, but when you expand it and calculate the DPMs, we have a significant enough difference to hand out some points. Namely, the Roma is going to get 3 big points for a better HE DPM, AP DPM, and fire chance per minute. The Veneto strikes back though for having better secondary DPM. It does have SAP secondaries as well, which the Roma doesn't have, but their effectiveness is circumstantial, so the Veneto will be leaving this screen with just 1 point for better secondaries. Next up is the anti-aircraft artillery screen. Although their AA ratings are both an atrocious 68, the Veneto's average AA damage per second is actually a decent amount higher than the Roma's. You really notice the difference when comparing the 37mm AA guns. That's gonna pull the Veneto to within 1. Next, let's maneuver on over to maneuverability. These screens are nearly identical, with the only difference being the Veneto's rudder being better by just 1/10 of a second. I mean, what's the point, Wargaming? Come on. Next up is the concealment screen. The concealment screens are in fact exactly the same, so we'll move on quickly from here. Now let's move over to the armor viewer. Unsurprisingly, the armor, including the citadel protection for the sister ships, is nearly identical. After painstakingly crunching all the numbers, it appears that there are only a few minor differences in the way the turret and the citadel armors are categorized, but the layers all end up being very similar. If you're unfamiliar with Italian battleships, take note of those raised citadels. They're not quite as high as Russian battleships, but they are indeed very exposed. Make sure not to give up too much broadside in these guys. Well, that brings us to our summary, and there you have it. The Roma takes this versus 3-2. It gets points for better HE DPM, AP DPM, and fire chance per minute, while the Veneto's 2 points come from its secondaries and better AA defense. Now, although the Roma wins this stat comparison between these two ships, I personally like both of these beauties. I love my time brawling in the Roma when only Di Vivello is available as a commander, and now I love brawling in the Veneto as I start my grind towards the Lepanto. Overall, I think you're going to have a ton of fun in both of these ships. The crawling smoke screens adds a unique element to them, and now that there are 2 commanders to choose from, you can really experiment with some fun and unique builds. Well, that's it for this versus video. Hope you guys did enjoy it. These videos do take a lot of time, so please, if you could, hit that thumbs up button for me. And if you do want to see more of my videos, consider hitting that subscribe button. Feel free to leave a comment down below and tell me which of these 2 ships you like better yourself. And as always, take care of yourselves and do what makes you happy.